Hello everybody, and welcome back to Space Engine. I'm just around Earth because last time I opened Space Engine, I was grabbing B-roll for my last video. Yes. Anyways, so we're going to meander off into the galaxy because I enjoy meandering off into the galaxy. Let's go to the Large Magellanic Cloud because I haven't been there in a while. Anyways, it has been quite the week. I've gotten a lot done. Been very busy, which is why I haven't been doing videos. And I apologize, but yeah. I actually, after this video, I have to set up my printer because I have to print off a model kit that I sold. Which, if you would like a model kit, you can get them. I'll link below to the store. I'll probably set up an Etsy shop to make it easier because more people use Etsy. But I just like the shop that I put it in because it's free. Like, hosting is just paid for a little bit out of sales, and I like that. And last time I set up an Etsy account, it was terrible because I had a real hard time with their support. But I might try again just for ease of people. But yeah, what all has happened recently? There's been, well, Inspiration 4 happened. Was that last week? I don't even remember. It kind of just happened and went. It was kind of cool. I enjoyed it, I guess. But yeah, I've just mostly been working on gaming stuff. Well, the last few days I've been mostly working on, I'm kind of like redoing, well not redoing, but like heavily editing the Starship. That's going to be my, the Cosmic Ocean game I'm working on. So it's the same ship you see in the trailer, but I've changed quite a bit. I've completely redone the, oh there we go, the crew section. I edited the engine. It no longer has an engine bell. It now has a magnetic nozzle. It looks better. I might toss a screen cap of that into the community tab at some point. But yeah, it's kind of fun. I was also just working on, well, actually, just mostly that, to be perfectly honest. All right, we have a temperate arid subterra with life. Fantastic. It's unicellular, terrestrial, and organic. Good to know. I always like exotic life. This isn't exotic, mind you, it's carbon-based, but eh. Speaking of which, my last video, one of my viewers asked me if I could look through some world building he was working on. And I said, of course, because I love seeing, well, I love stuff like that, like, you know, your own creations and drawings, writings. I'm always down for that. If you have a DeviantArt page, feel free to link it to me and I will look through it and talk about it. But yeah, they had some spaceships, an alien species, and a planet, which I like. I love when people design planets, personally. And overall, I liked it. Like, yeah, so far you're doing a great job. I did notice, and don't worry, this is a good thing. I can tell you were inspired by Alex Reese, or Rise. I can't really pronounce his last name. I can't really read most people's last names, actually, or first names. I have a hard time with hearing words in my head sometimes. But yeah, anyways, the fellow who created the Biran species, Brini, the little hexapod critters, which I think are super cool. And I could tell there was a bit of influence there, which is fine. A lot of stuff I design has influence from other people. So I thought that was cool. I always like seeing non-humanoid creatures. Which is weird because I tend to design hexapods myself, but I usually go for more of a crab aesthetic. Mostly because it makes sense, because evolution is always trying to make crabs. Like in one of my short stories I did, the aggressor aliens, which there's a lesson to be learned in those stories, but they were little four-legged crab creatures. And in another story, actually, they were like tendrily, or another, like the aliens we found were like tendrily kelp creatures that lived in a methane lake. You never actually saw them fully. You just kind of had implications of them. Oh, this planet has a moon with life. The planet itself does not have life. Actually, another one, the aliens were, they were a post-biological species of living in a nanite cloud. So it's like the planet was enveloped in a fog, and the planet seemed primitive with just a fog covering. But what was actually going on was there was actually a highly advanced species living on that planet, but they were living in a virtual, like, uplink created by this global nanite cloud network. And they could, like, rearrange matter and stuff to suit them. So they were actually highly advanced and technically highly dangerous. But there was also a moral tale in that story. A lot of my short stories tend to be kind of dark, and they have, I guess, morality tales. I don't know. I use it the way sci-fi is supposed to be used, which is just I use it to explore topics, stories, concepts, and things that either I like, dislike, bother me, or are hopeful. So like hopes, fears, and what ifs. And a lot of them are actually they're also in an anthology. Like they're all in a shared universe. I'm gonna make them into an anthology and submit them to publishers. They're currently, you can find them for free on Booksy. I might link that below if you want to read somewhat depressing science fiction. One of them's actually a comedy, but most of them are fairly dark. And they don't paint the military in a good light, so yeah, heads up on that one. But, you know, deep lore. But yeah, going back to the DeviantArt page, I love seeing people's creations, especially alien creations, planets. I love seeing like planets and worlds being developed. I also like the starship that he drew. It used an LQBR drive. That's always fun. It's just interesting. It's like thumbs up for me. I always appreciate that. If anybody else has things, stories, drawings, whatever, link me to your gallery and I'll be happy to look through them because it's just always interesting. I actually, do I have any, like, trying to think if I have any, like, actual solid designs of things. I kind of do. Most of it's in my head, though. Although I am designing a creature for a book I'm writing. It's also going to be possibly a hexapod, but I actually haven't fully figured out its, like, physical form. But I have some ideas for its biology. Like, it's going to have hemocyanin instead of blood, which is what I think horseshoe crabs and a lot of insects have. It's like hemolymph. Instead of having blood cells, you just have, like, a protein-rich fluid that transports oxygen, usually based on, like, copper instead of iron, which is, what did I say before? Not hemolymph. Hemocyanin, there we go. So instead of hemoglobin, which is based on iron, hemocyanin is based on, like, iron, or no, the copper, I mean. So you can get creatures with blue blood, green blood, yellow blood, purple blood. I think octopus, like some cephalopods, have purple blood based because they have a hemocyanin-based hemolymph. It's all fascinating. I love the biology. Actually, one thing I've been wanting to work on for a while, I am no longer in the galaxy, is because War of the Worlds is in the public domain, you can do stuff with it. And one thing I've been wanting to do is a kind of a book in the format of a report, like a science report. And it's basically going to just, all it's going to do is just do a deep dive into the Martian biology and technology recovered after the attack. So basically, it's going to have the format of, like, a report of information gathered from, like, the turn of the century up to modern day, gathered from the Martian bodies and Martian technology left behind on Earth after the attack. So, like, you know, medical reports, engineering reports, just stuff like that, because I've actually put a lot of thought into, like, how would the Martians function? And there's enough information in the books about their anatomy that you can draw some conclusions, so I might work on that. I'll need to find an artist to do a lot of the illustrations, because although I can draw, and I can draw fairly okay, I don't know, I don't draw well enough for it to, like, like, I can do schematic diagrams very easily, and I can do anatomy diagrams, but not as well as I'd like. So if I do that project, I'll probably hire an artist to help out. But that's not currently being, like, it's not on paper right now. It's just in my head. The things in paper currently are short stories and that book. What's that? Random. Wait, what? Which galaxy is that? I want to know. That's IC 5332. Excellent, excellent. I just like details and like useless backgrounds, lore, and like world building. So it seemed like a fun idea, you know. It's like talk about the Martians, and I love War of the Worlds, and I like speculating about the Martians. I think they're cool. I really like how they were just straight up non-human. Like, it seemed that like pre 20th century aliens always had more creativity to them. Like the Martians from War of the Worlds were completely non-humanoid. They were basically heads with tentacles and beak-like mouths with giant eyes, and they reproduced asexually, and they had a large membrane on the back, which was an ear that didn't work in Earth's atmosphere, and they fed through transfusion of lower life forms. Like it was, they were interesting and they were spooky. They were basically biological computers. Like they weren't technological computers, but they evolved to be just basically just their minds basically operated like computers. They no longer had empathy. I think sadness. They lost a bunch of their basic emotions. They did seem to have some emotion. Like they would make noises of pain and excitement were two that were noticed. So it's like they seem to have some emotion, but they lost a lot of their baser emotion, like empathy and pragmatism, and they basically just became analytical monsters, and that was their undoing, and it was great. Or oh man, in Star Trek, the original series, actually, this is 20th century, mind you, but there was actually a lot of non-humanoid aliens in Star Trek TOS, which people always make fun of Star Trek for having a lot of just, rubber forehead aliens, which it's because of, oh, it's because for budget. TOS had, like, the lowest budget of them all, but it had the widest array of non-humanoid creatures. Granted, the energy beings were cheap, but you had things like the ornithoids, which were those little bird creatures that were on that planet where they were tormenting the crew, pretending to be like Shakespearean wizards. I always forget their name. I remember like there was the woman and the guy. It was the episode Catspaw, and the bald guy had like actual like he developed human emotions, and he actually felt bad for the crew and tried to help them, but the woman was just evil, and she kept trying to like torture them. And then Kirk destroyed their little wand thingy, which made all the illusions go away. Kirk did that a lot, but there was also the Malkotians were just like floating head creatures. The Metrons looked humanoid when they manifested as humanoid, but they were energy beings. The Horda was a rock creature. There were the other rock creatures on that planet with Abraham Lincoln, which, out of context, if you didn't understand Star Trek, that sentence would make no sense to you, and I'm not going to explain it, because it's funny. But yeah, there was that rock creature. I guess the computer life forms, I guess, count, like Landru. Well, he had a humanoid hologram, but he was just a computer. But no, it's like you just had a lot of these really kind of strange creatures. Oh, the giant brain cell creatures that were they looked like giant ravioli. One of them attacked Spock. They were kind of cool. Like I really appreciate how the original series actually had a surprising amount of atypical non-humanoid aliens. Whereas in other series, they kind of stuck more with I guess because puppets don't work really great. Except for in Voyager, there was that bird baby creature that was a very obvious hand puppet, which I guess is why they stopped doing that. Species 8472 was non-humanoid. They were pretty cool. Oh, those creepy bug creatures in the Next Generation from the episode Conspiracy, where they blew Remek's head off. That episode was funny because you're like watching Star Trek TNG and you're like, oh, this is kind of a fun family show. And you watch that episode and you see a guy just full on in the camera, his head explodes, and you're like, oh, alright, thank you. They were actually supposed to be the main bad guys in TNG, but they decided to go with the Borg instead. It's like the whole story about the development of TNG is kind of funny because originally the Ferengi were going to be like the main antagonists in TNG, but when they first showed up in the last outpost, they were goofy and nobody took them seriously. They just felt unthreatening. So then they were like, all right, fine, then we'll have these spooky bug creatures. So they had them show up in conspiracy, and they had that signal beamed off into the galaxy. And then when they were kind of working on it later, they were like, it's just the stop motion looked goofy. We don't really want to deal with these things. So they kind of backed off and said, we'll just throw the Romulans in as the main antagonist, and we'll think about it later. And then when later happened, they were like, well, the bugs aren't going to work, so we'll do a different species instead, which was the Borg. And they showed up as, like, they were originally supposed to be insectoid creatures and hives, but they couldn't get the costumes to look good, so they just made them cyborgs. That's called thinking on your feet. I guess Armus was also a non-humanoid creature, but he was like the manifestation of evil, and he was kind of a bastard, so I don't know. I always appreciate when shows try to make a non-humanoid, purely alien creature, because back in the day you'd always get these ideas for non-humanoid things, and then kind of after the 50s, everyone kind of fell back on the little green man concept, and then after that, aliens all just kind of became oddly shaped humanoids, like, you know, 2 legs, 2 arms, bilaterally symmetrical, and it's like, I guess. The whole idea of convergent evolution, where it's like, oh, it makes sense for an intelligent creature to have, you know, these characteristics: forward-facing eyes, binocular vision, grasping hands with opposable thumbs for manipulation, bipedal locomotion is just easy. Then it's like, I get it, but it's not fun. The Martians from War of the Worlds are fun. They were tentacle creatures that may have been humanoid in the past, but evolved to become just basically brains with tentacles. However, they did, in the book, mention that they found corpses of another Martian in the cylinders that were more humanoid. They were tall, thin, and had like silicon glass-like bones, and they would have died in our gravity. And they were suspected that they were brought along by the primary Martians as a food source for them on the way from Mars to Earth. And there's some fan speculation that those Martians were actually Selenites, which were the moon creatures in H.G. Wells' book First Men in the Moon, which were these caste-based insect creatures that lived on the moon, and they were actually pretty cool. That book was very strange. I always recommend it because it was a very odd story. At one point, they get like high on moon mushrooms and stop. And they lose the ability to speak coherent sentences, and that was a really difficult chapter for me to read because he just straight up wrote them as if they were like stammering, stuttering, and saying words wrong. And being dyslexic, I was reading through this, and it's like, I can't tell how much of this is my brain screwing up and how much of this is actually being written. And it's like, on the moon, humans were very strong because of the gravity difference, so, like, the scientist guy wanted to be nice to the moon people, but the guy he brought along kept, like, losing his shit and, like, killing the moon people by, like, just, like, hitting them, and they would just die because they were brittle-boned. And then at one point, he found like a gold bar, and like a pry bar or a piece of metal kind of thing, and he used it as a bludgeoning weapon. So he's like running through these underground caves, bludgeoning insect creatures, and the scientist guy is freaking out, telling him to stop doing it. And it was just a very weird book. I'll have to read it again because I honestly don't know how much of it that I remember is real and how much of it is a fever dream. But yeah, no, it was an experience. But I enjoyed the Selenites. They were cool. Like in my stories, I don't know. I actually describe quite a few creatures, but they're never. I don't know. I don't go too much into detail. Like in the funny story I did, there were these underwater creatures. They were not intelligent. They were just animals, but they were like kind of like translucent starfish with feathery ends to their arms. They would swim around and they were bioluminescent. And they were harmless, but they were just there for comedic effect. I guess one of my stories, the creatures were technically humanoid just through description. I never described what they looked like, but you can infer they were humanoid by what was going on. And another one, again, I don't really describe them in too much detail. I mostly describe their culture because that story was from the point of view of a anthropologist team that were studying them, and that one ends kind of sad. Yeah, I don't know, just interesting little things. All my stories end sad. Jesus Christ. Look at these rings. These rings are quite... Oh. Oh, I'm on spaceship mode. That's why. I was like, things aren't going well. Now, it has 79 moons, one of which has life. So we are going to find this moon. It's probably, yeah, subglacial. I honestly think that Space Engine is correct in the assumption that most life would be just in shell moons like this. Which is kind of sad if you think about it, because developing sapient, or developing a technological civilization in an ice moon would be very, very difficult, possibly impossible. Maybe not impossible, but very, very, very hard. Because like with us, we developed fire and opposable limbs, which allowed us to become, well, what we are today. But if you live in an ocean under ice, you can't really discover fire, and grasping hands might not be useful. Looking at the ocean anyways, grasping hands aren't terribly useful except for very few specific areas. So you could have creatures that do develop intelligence, but then never go beyond there because they can't develop technology, or at least they can't develop technology we know of, unless they utilize like different forms of metallurgy and they use geothermal energy to do stuff, or they could develop computing using what the hell is it called? Oh god, it's like logic gates made for fluid. Cars sometimes use them. I remember I used to see a bunch where they're like blocks of metal that have a bunch of like channels and stuff cut in them, and it's like fluid moves through them the same way electricity moves through logic gates, and you can actually make a computer that runs on fluid. I forget what it's called, but trust me, it's a thing, and creatures here could develop that, I suppose. Or they develop technology. I don't know. There's just the idea of having an intelligent species living in an ice shell moon, and it's like, how would they ever get out to explore the galaxy? How would they understand the universe if you can't see the universe? Like, it's kind of an odd thought. But anyways, that's 22 minutes, 23 minutes actually, so I'll end it off there. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you would like me to go places, let me know. Topics to talk about, let me know. If you have things you want me to look at, again, let me know. I'll post links below for things I talked about, such as my store, the Patreon account, which I didn't talk about, but I'm bringing up now. And what was the other thing? Or was that just it? I don't know. Either way, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and space.